Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Op. This is a little bonus episode. Today, I have Sarah Scanlon, who is a certified intimacy coordinator, which is a mouthful. And her job is to come onto sets when there's nudity, when there's intimacy, when there are sex scenes on set, whatnot, and sort of, coordinate that. This is a relatively new position that definitely didn't exist when I started out. And I remember early on, nobody really told us how we were supposed to be on set when people were doing things naked on set. And so I just thought, Sarah, it would be interesting to talk to you and hear your view of things, what your job is, and what operators should and shouldn't be doing when we have intimate scenes on set. So thank you so much for jumping on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking.
So can you start out by just telling me what is your job?
For sure. So for television intimacy coordinating, I have sort of a threefold role. The first is to advocate for the actors to make sure that they understand what's being asked of them as far as the storytelling in the scene is concerned, the movement that the director is hoping to see, any of the simulated sex that is written into the script. And so it's my job to advocate for them on set and also beforehand, making sure that I give them all a call beforehand individually so that we can talk privately about any questions or concerns that they have. The second piece of the job is to, sort of uplift the director's vision. So to, make it as exciting as possible, be, second set of eyes, give, suggestions on how we could set something up to just make it as exciting as we can. One of the things that sometimes people are worried about is, oh, I'm going to have an intimacy coordinator. They're going to make it too clean looking. They're going to make it too, choreographed, this sort of thing. They're going to sort of the movement equivalent of a dumb it down. And actually it's the opposite, is that we want to make it as, look as realistic as possible. And then the third piece of my job is to provide movement coaching as requested. So, the director obviously is directing the scene, but sometimes they'll say, "Hey, how can I make this look more X, Y, and Z?" So they'll give me kind of an adjective that they want to see. I want this to be more sensual. I want this to be more raunchy. I want this to be funnier. And what I can do is I can sort of act as a movement translator for that adjective, and I can give the actors achievable action that when they do them, it will look more raunchy or sensual. So, something like, instead of saying to an actor, "Hey, I want this to look more raunchy," I can say, "Hey, on this next take, if you're comfortable with this, can we have you, run your fingers through his hair and grab onto it and kind of pull his head back a little bit, and then give me a
Mhm.
nice a voiced exhale." And them just doing that action will read on camera in a certain way. So, again, like, raunchy means something else to each person. And so, what we don't want to do is give two actors a direction that they can interpret differently and, surprise each other. So that's sort of the other, sort of the third piece of the role is to really be able to give people achievable action in these simulated sex scenes, and then to make sure that when we're having nudity on set, whether it's actual nudity or even nude illusions, that all of the uh, modesty garments fit properly. It's sort of the least sexy thing. It's like we're taped into these costumes. We're working really closely with hair and makeup and the costume, wardrobe department as well. But sometimes these actors are literally taped into certain costumes, and so I have to say, hey, we can do this. We have to do this in 5 takes, because otherwise, like, they need a water break. They need to to untape themselves
Oh,
and then
yeah.
tape themselves
Yeah.
back up. So there's things like that. That are things that we just sort of don't even think about, that are on my
Yeah.
plate to think about.
And do you find that most directors are happy that you're there, or when you first show up, not after they've realized that you're not going to like hijack their set, but I mean, are they mostly happy that you're there now at this point?
Yeah, I've been really lucky with the directors that I've worked with, where I haven't run into, and I'm going to knock on wood real quick. I haven't run into a lot of resistance, and I think one of the reasons for that is because the role is becoming more well known as something that is not only for the actors, but it's also a support position for the director, and it's a support
Yeah,
position for the crew, also because we might be doing a simulated assault that even though we know that's not real, the crew is being subjected to that. And so something that's nice with the intimacy coordinator too is that everyone on set can see how much care is going into these scenes. And I really want to work with the directors in the way that they want to work. So some directors really want me in there, hands on, very collaborative in every sense of the word. And some directors just say, hey, you know what? I just need to make sure that these actors feel comfortable before they get to set. And when I'm there, just if you could just stand behind the monitor. I don't really want notes. I don't want this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, great, no problem. And so it's like
yeah.
in those situations, I'm just there to advocate for the actor, and that's totally fine because that's part of big part of my job. Um, and then so sometimes what I'll find is once they again realize that I'm sort of there to act in whatever way they need me, uh, people sort of warm up to it. And I like to come in with I'm not. I'm coming in with an outside eye and saying, "Hey, if there's a way that I can make this look more exciting, sexier, that the actors can be the most comfortable as they can, that you can be the director can be the most comfortable as they can,
Yeah.
talking about these things and using terminology, very technical terminology." Um, I find that people really warm up to it. And
Hmm.
if the job that day is to stay out of the way and make sure the actors feel good beforehand, then that's great. Then that's my job for the day. But sometimes the job is,
So
director saying, "Hey, I'm really nervous about this scene. I don't know how to talk to these actors about this. Can you help?" And I'm like,
yeah,
"Of course."
so it sounds like you really just, I mean, do a lot of what camera operators do, which is you read the room and you figure out what's needed and you fill that. I mean, it also sounds like you're there as a little bit, and I'm going to use this term, but it's not, but as a police person, just to make sure that lines aren't crossed and that people aren't being asked to do things they don't want to. Um, you mentioned, or well, you told me earlier, and we talked about this, that you are certified, which I think I'm not sure, but you may be the first certified intimacy coordinator that I've worked with. Can you just explain what that means, the certification?
Yeah. So SAG-AFTRA actually has just recognized intimacy coordinators as for lack of a better word, legitimate. So like
Yeah,
important piece of these scenes on set. There is a SAG registry that has all sorts of requirements for intimacy coordinators, including certain types of training. There are now a couple of different training programs, but it's a certain amount of hours of everything from movement training. There's a lot of outside classes and training that you need to take in conflict resolution, anti-racism training, LGBTQAT plus, friendly language, and how to deal with that kind of thing on set. Mental health first aid. We're not
wow.
therapists, but it's really important that we know how to um, sort of clock if someone is having a real reaction that is not a safe reaction to have. And I wanted to go back to the word of the policing, because I definitely, our job is not to police anyone, but it is to make sure that everyone understands the boundaries that have been set on set and
Yeah,
in the scene. And that, for something like if there's a rider, to make sure that that rider is being adhered to. And
sure.
so,
Yeah.
it's really more of a, I like to think of it more as like a collaboration for sure than sort of like, oh no, HR is here. Like I'm not HR, but
And
as far as sort of,
I
yeah.
apologize. I should have used a better word, but I couldn't think of
Oh
one
no,
at the
that's
time.
okay.
So, but
For lack
I
for lack
realize
of a
it's not,
better word, no,
yeah.
Yeah, and a
Yep.
lot of people use that word, and it's funny because in a lot of mostly theater settings, I walk in and say, "Hey, y'all, don't worry, I'm not the touch police, but I'm here to make sure that you're comfortable with what's going on." Um,
Sure.
because sometimes people go, "Oh, there's an intimacy coordinator. I can't try this, or I can't touch my scene partner without saying a big explanation beforehand." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. We just want to set up some boundaries and some understanding for you to have a playground, and then to be able to play within those boundaries." So if you know someone's
Yeah.
boundaries, if you know, hey, I'm comfortable with you touching this, that, and the other, great. Then you've set up that consent, and then you can play within that, and you're not worried about, oh, is my scene partner going to be scared if I do this? It's like, no, you've just gotten consent to do that. And so,
Yeah.
I like to, be someone who can help with communication and broker consent. And that's with the certification as well. There's some, a lot of shadowing and mentoring that you need to do on set, because with TV specifically, it's so quick. With theater, we're rehearsing for weeks, and for
Yeah.
TV, we're rehearsing for 5 minutes. you know?
5 minutes,
um,
maybe.
5 minutes maybe. There's been a few
Yeah.
situations where I have had a separate outside rehearsal just for more complicated scenes. Um, but usually it's like we talk through it, and we have a private rehearsal with, essential personnel only. So that'll usually be an operator, DP, um, and, the director. And then we, mark it, and then we film it. So it's
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But, so the certification kind of gets you ready, for all of those situations, and just to ensure that the people who say they are qualified to do this job are in fact qualified and experienced, because what we don't want to have
Yeah.
happen is we don't want to have harm occur. And this is a very sensitive position, and so knowing how to talk about consent, knowing how to diffuse situations, is really important. And so we don't want someone to take a weekend workshop and then say, "Oh, okay, I can hop on a set." It's like, no, you wouldn't do that for a fight director. You wouldn't do that for a stunt director. So, we need to make sure that intimacy coordinators, that it's also, it takes some training.
Yeah, yeah. That's all. It's amazing to hear. And the one question that I have for you before we get into what an operator should know, is, so you mentioned that you'll call them ahead of time and have a conversation. And as part of that conversation, you've read the script, you then call them. As part of that conversation, what are your boundaries and what are you okay with and what are you not okay with? Like, do you sort of find that out ahead of time so you know what to watch for?
Absolutely. So the first conversation actually is with the director, and so for my conversations with the director, I say, hey, like, because sometimes the script will say, I literally had a script once that said, um, they look at each other, she pulls at his pants, it's on. Like, what does that mean? Like, it's on. Like, what do you want to see? So what I'll do with the director is I'll say, okay, great. Here's this language in the script. What do
Yeah.
you want to see? What's your blue sky version? If the actors had, if you were working with AI robots, what would you want to see?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and forget, even forget, like, how much nudity can we see on this network, or what kind of thing can we see on this network. That's the other thing about my job, is I have to know some of these things, of like, oh, okay, we can't
Yeah.
show full frontal on this, or we can't show thrusting on this network. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But I'll have that conversation with the director. I'll get their sort of blue sky vision. At that point, if there's anything in that vision that I know is not going to be possible, I can say, oh, okay, great. So if we want to show something like that, we're going to have to hide their pelvis and make it
Hmm.
implied that this is happening. Um, Another word that I love using, and actually this is kind of going to go into the operator question, is throwing the word simulated on everything we do. So this is a simulated sex scene, and not a sex scene, right? And that's
Yeah.
just really good vocabulary to sort of, again, separate the actor and from the character, and separate the action. This is not real. We're telling a story. We're simulating this thing. So that sort of adds another layer of professional, like, hey, we're at work. and we're doing this thing, we're simulating this
Yep.
thing. So, but after I talk to the director, I'll go to the actor and I'll say, hey, first of all, here's the script. Here's what the script says. Here's the director's vision. I'll give them, sort of my translated version of the director's vision. And I'll say, do you have any concerns about this? Is there anything that you're not comfortable with? Is there anything that you're wondering about as far as the nudity that's been requested? For nudity, we do write riders, which specifies very specifically what we will be showing in the final edit and what we
Huh.
cannot show in the final edit. So, I mean, it's everything from like uh, gluteal cleft is a word we use a lot. So
Oh my
like
gosh.
literally, it's like, okay, great, right up to where the leg meets the butt. It's like that's how technical the language is, um,
Okay.
and it's pretty wild. So, uh,
Wow.
iliac crest, right, we can see just below the iliac crest, so it's like, okay, great, where is that on the person, um, but that makes it really specific that then I can go to an
Yeah.
operator and say, hey, here is how high we're going to be able to see. So, like, we shouldn't even bother shooting anything higher because we're not going to see it. We can't put it in an edit.
But just to be clear, you're gonna have to explain what an ilial crest is to me if you come with me to me with that, because
That's
I have
right.
no
The
idea what it
iliac
is.
crest is just the hip bone, just the front of the hip bone,
Okay.
that little like rounded
Hip bone I
spot,
can
right?
get on top of.
Yeah.
That's great.
um,
It's funny because
but
listening to you talk about this is right on line with most of the people who, I mean, invariably you meet people who aren't in this industry and they'll invariably say, hey, have you ever shot sex scenes? What's that like? And I always go, it's kind of the most tediously annoying and boring, because it's very much, it's almost like math. It's just we have to do this and then we have to do that. It's very technical, and sure, in the edit or whatever it's great, but and even if, by the way, and I've been in this situation where what you're shooting, what they're actually doing is, passionate and sexy and whatever, I, as an operator, am so concerned about what I can see and when I can't see. And okay, I mean, just thinking of one thing in particular, it's like, okay, so I'm on her face and then I've got to come down to her back, but I need to make sure his hand comes to the side for when I tilt down so I don't see certain things. And then and it's just this constant, very, very specific thing. Um, but maybe that's a good segue into, uh, I'm a new operator. I've never done this before. What are your suggestions for how I should operate on set, on any level?
Yeah, so the operator is definitely considered essential personnel. For simulated sex and nudity on set, we close the set, which means that any non-essential, I mean, everyone's essential, let's say, on a set, but essential personnel means the director, the DP, the focus puller, um, the boom op, if there's a person in the room needing to do a boom. Um, usually the writer, if they're there,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's a very small amount of people, and then the rest of the monitors are either turned off or flagged, so that no one who doesn't need to see them, they don't see them. Um, Using the word simulated is really helpful, so okay, great, we're going to be doing the simulated sex scene. Just a reminder, this is a closed set. If you have assistants, just making sure that they clear out as well. Um, Anytime anyone is changing or taking a robe off before we shoot, we always want to pan the camera down. So the camera needs to be panned down or to the side away from the actors until we are rolling, and the actors take robes off if there's nudity involved. They get set up in the positions that they need to be in, and then the camera will shift and come to the action. That's another thing that is really helpful, just again for sort of privacy. um, we never want to comment, even if we think that it's uh, flattering. We never want to comment on actors' bodies. We never want to comment on the action. Sometimes an actor will ask what their framing is, but that is definitely one of the things that I am there for, and I can explain the framing, or I really like when the camera op introduces themselves to the actor, because what we don't want is we don't want you to just feel like a robot who's doing a camera. It's really nice to say, hey, my name is Dave. I'm thanks thanks for being here today. If you have any questions or concerns, I know you have your director and intimacy coordinator here, but I want to make sure that you're as comfortable as possible. So please let me know if you need anything. And even if they don't need anything, it's just nice to put it's nice to put a face to a name. So I would say not to worry, and introduce yourself, especially like on a closed set. Um, but yeah, those are sort of the big things. And then again, like asking about what the rider language is, of, hey, and one of the things I do is I also talk to the DP about this, but the DP is usually not in the room. The camera op is. So, I'll say, hey, spoke to the DP, but just so here's as low as we can go in this frame. And then, if the camera op has a thing of, hey, I need his hand to move down a little further because I'm missing this, that, and the other. I love when people ask me that, because then I can bring that to the director, or I can bring that to the actor and give them that little note. And there's just less telephone being played. And you do have to, again, like, read the room and see, who's the best person to talk to about this. But really, asking, I'd rather have people ask more questions than less on scenes like this, just so that they're really clear. And sometimes a camera has to get really close to somebody, and so making sure it's like, okay, great, can can we get you an apple box under this pillow so that when you get on the pillow it doesn't make the whole bed move, making sure that your setup is comfortable as well. We filmed a shower scene once, and the operator had to be holding the camera because of how we couldn't get it set up on a track or anything. So for me, it's like I had to set up the actors really fast because they're holding a very heavy camera, and it's wet and it's slippery, so there's a lot going
Yeah.
on. So I think also, advocating for what the operator needs to do their best job and get it as quickly as possible is also really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Those are all great tips. And one of the things that I actually do, which is really more psychological, but as soon as obviously I pan the camera off when we're not doing something, and the second that we cut, I pan the camera off. But I will also physically turn my body around, and if I can get up, I'll actually stand up, or if I'm standing, and turn my body around. And it's really I mean, no matter what, I'm obviously going to like look away, but the reason I do it actually is because it's a very big movement that lets them know, hey, the professional part is over, and I'm not looking at you anymore until you get your robe on, and then I wait, whatever. But there are all these weird psychological things. I have a question for you, because this has happened quite a bit, and like, I mean, there are scenes where they want extreme close-ups. So I'm six, like you said, I'm 6 inches away, maybe with a handheld camera, and we're trying to get focus and this and that and the other. First of all, the one thing that I always do is I always, like, let's say, they're on a couch and I need to put my knee on the couch right next to them. Before I do anything, I look to the act, assuming there are two actors. I mean, most of the time it's two actors. I'll just say, are you both okay if I get this close? I mean, I'll always ask permission, which of course they never have a problem with, because they understand, what's up. Hopefully, if it's a show I'm on, they already know me. But like you said, if
Mhm.
not, I will have introduced myself. But then there's also that thing of, like, they want his hand to come right on some part of her neck or something like that. And it won't be happening. And I'll usually, say, cause we're right in there, can I talk them in? Okay. And then sometimes the actor or actress will actually say, can you just put my hand where you need it? And, and I'm assuming that once they've asked you that, that's considered an okay thing to do without, letting you know, or et cetera, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that that there are ways to do that without actually having to physically touch the actor. I think just you
Yeah.
can, you can point, you can't see me, I'm using my hands. But
Yeah.
you
No, no,
can,
absolutely.
if the actor says, hey, can you show me exactly where, you like very specifically, pointing to the spot on the neck and then
Yeah.
saying, please put your hand there, and then, adjust it a little bit further down. Okay, perfect. So there are ways
Yep.
to sort of walk someone through that without having to put hands on anybody. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's, and that's, again, that's new also, because it's like, oh, okay, I got consent to do whatever, it's like, again,
Yeah.
let's like keep this as professional as we can. And again, if there's something that is so specific that does need that kind of thing, I would prefer that the op call in the intimacy coordinator and say, hey, can you, because a lot of the time the intimacy coordinator will sort of shift people around, be like, hey, can you do this, that, and the other. I try very hard, again, not to put hands on the actors, but if there is a situation where there needs to be, also when I'm helping someone with modesty garments, my hands are on the actor. It's like
Yep.
it's like you can't tape someone up without putting your hands on the tape and parts of their body. So
Yeah.
there is sort of there's sort of an understanding there, of physical touch and physical closeness, but yeah, there are definitely ways of explaining that and doing that. But yeah,
Yeah.
and it is very helpful. It's very helpful for the actors, especially because like they a lot of the time don't know their framing, or that they'll ask, but if they don't
Yep.
know what the framing is, so sometimes what I'll do is I'll get a photo, delete it immediately, but get a photo of what their framing is. I'll say, oh, okay, here's your framing, and then they say, oh, I get it. So a lot of the
I
time,
get it.
it's just
Yep.
really helpful. And if there isn't a coordinator, or even if you're doing a scene that doesn't require a coordinator, it's also really helpful for sometimes for the op to say, hey, here's what your framing is. Like here's your frame. Just
Yeah.
you have to worry about what's going on down there, because you can't see your feet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that quite often. Is I'll often turn, assuming they want to, I'll ask them first, but I'll
Right.
turn the monitor around just to show them what it is. And I should back up and say the one instance that I was talking about where they asked me to put the hand, number one, these are two actors I'd worked with quite a bit and even knew personally, so they had no
Yeah.
problem with it. Number two, their thing was, we're obviously not hitting it and we just want to get out of here. And
Yeah.
also
No,
I
totally.
said, are both of you okay if I just move his hand up into, yeah, absolutely. So, but clearly touching anyone is the last thing you ever want to do. And I totally get that.
Yeah, but
But
it's like, sounds like you asked for consent and they gave it to you. So, and that's the
essentially,
other thing.
yeah,
It's like we're all consenting adults. So there's a certain amount of, again, sort of the idea of not being the touch police. It's like humans touch each other. Humans touch each other, and so
yeah,
we just want to make sure that that touch stays very professional, and that we ask before we shift someone around. But yeah, definitely, if there's a request and a requirement to do that, then yes, absolutely. There's
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because I didn't actually, I mean, it doesn't surprise me in any way, but I didn't really know about the writer. So I may ask about that in the future. But what I have experienced more, quite a bit, is, and nothing against anybody, but more often it's with actresses. Sometimes it's with actors, but where they'll go, hey, do me a favor, just don't see the bottom of my chin, or I don't like the way this looks, or I don't like the way that looks. So I sort of tuck it away, and then I'll sort of go, hey, when you come around to this side, maybe keep your shoulder back, or whatever it happens to be. They'll generally quietly say, please don't see X, Y, and Z, which probably is not a writer thing, but is more I don't really like how that looks. So um, yeah, you do get into some weird situations with that, with actors. The other thing that I've found that's really interesting, and it's a little bit of a minefield, or it could be. I've never had it be a minefield, but there's some actors I've found who, when they're doing sex scenes, they're very much like, they're quiet, they're very, dialed in, they're whatever. And there's some actors that I found, and it's usually co-stars who have been together for quite some time. I just
Hmm.
find that that's the case, who actually are like, they're like, look, this is awkward and this is this, but we're going to treat this like we treat the scene where we're sitting at the desk and doing paperwork, and in between takes we're just going to joke around or whatever. And so the funny thing is, I try to be exactly the same way as I always am on set, which is if I know them well, I'm probably part of that. But at the same time, I pull it back a little bit because you want to make sure that they're sort of driving the bus. So you just sort of like, if one of them cracks a joke, you laugh at it, but you probably don't throw your own joke in there or whatever. So it
Sure.
suddenly becomes this new set of parameters that you have to keep an eye on. But for anybody who's never been a part of it's an odd situation, that's for sure. And personally, I'll say I appreciate there being an intimacy coordinator there now, because it's now like sort of gone, hey, remember this sort of Wild West part of what we used to do? Well, there's someone who's like keeping an eye on it and on some level controlling it and making sure it's done well.
Yeah.
So it's always a plus when we have that now.
And something else that I mean, these scenes are awkward and they're so technical, and the for and this is not everyone's vibe, but I find that for me, this is what works for me. These are not the scenes where I want to, like, it's like, oh, now is the intimacy, like now is the simulated sex. We have to be very serious. It's like, again, we want to be professional, but like if people are cracking jokes and not at anyone's expense, but especially if an actor's like
Of
just trying
course,
to like calm themselves down or whatever. But I like to keep the mood, and again, reading the room, but the mood should be lighthearted. It's like, okay, great, we're doing this ridiculous thing, and you know it's not real, we're telling a story. um if people are wearing a lot of lotion and they're slippery, I mean, that's funny.
yeah,
So it's like,
yeah.
we don't want to like laugh at somebody, but if someone has to stop in the middle of the take because they're sliding down someone's body, like, hey, can we wipe some of this lotion off? Like,
Yeah,
it's goofy what we're doing. And so we want to treat it with the respect that it deserves, but also the thing that I don't want the room to be is sort of down and scared serious. And I haven't experienced that on our show, but and sometimes it tends actually to happen more in theater. It's like, oh, today's the intimacy day, and it's like, okay, guys, this is we're going to treat this like a movement class. We're going to treat this like a voice and movement class, and we're
yeah.
going to, again, we're not going to ask you how you do this at home. We're going to say, hey, here's the movement I want to see. Here's the kind of breath pattern I want to see. Here are the kind of sounds I would like you to make. I'm not saying, okay, make it sound like you're having an orgasm. Oh my goodness. Like the last thing you want to say to someone, because it's like, oh my God, now like that. And believe me, I've heard it said, and so
I'm
it's
sure you
like,
have.
again, it's like, no, 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 we're not using that language because this is not real. So here's the sounds that I want you to make. Here's the kind of breath
Yeah,
that I want to hear. And so again, it's just, how do I separate um this actor from the character, because the actor's going to act like they're going to bring their character to the movement and to the breath that they're doing. But yeah, it's just really important that, and as quickly as we can get it, let's get it. If we get it in two
yeah.
takes, let's get it in two takes.
It's no
Because we
it's
don't
no
need,
different than any other shot on
exactly,
that
and we
level.
don't we don't need, and even more so, like I like to tell newer directors, I'm like, hey, this one in particular, we need to get this in 5 takes or less because this is exhausting for the actors.
Yeah.
Um, and I have like a little hand signal that I give the actors that I'm like, hey, if you need to stop, flash this thing at camera and we stop. So
Oh wow,
we have
that's great.
yeah, we have little things in there like that. Um, and so just like little tricks like that are
That's
helpful.
great. Well,
Yeah,
well, Sarah, thank you so much. This has really been both informative and fascinating, because
yeah,
I've never really sat down and talked with an intimacy coordinator, other than the other day when I talked to you on set, and I was like, oh, this is
yeah.
kind of cool. Um, is there anything you want to sort of leave us with? Any thoughts that you didn't hit in here, or
I
advice
don't think
or
so.
anything?
I'm I'm just I'm really grateful that every department on set is starting to learn about this position, and also just how to uh, come to these scenes with a lot of sensitivity, but also with a lot of artistry, and that you're definitely a part of it. So making sure that if there's any discomfort on your end, that we're here for you as well. So if you're in an uncomfortable position, you can absolutely come to the intimacy coordinator and say, hey, this scene is making me really nervous, or hey, can you give me a little bit of background on the context of this, or and so that's something that I don't think is necessarily talked about a whole lot. It's like, okay, we're there for the actors, but what's really important to me too is we're there for the crew also, and the crew should feel comfortable and free and excited to come and talk to us as well, just to make sure that they're doing their job as comfortably and as artistically and exciting as possible as well.